Hello and welcome to Catch News. I'm in conversation today with Professor Sudipto Mundle. He is Professor Emeritus at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, one of our most eminent economists. He was also on the Monetary Policy Advisory Committee of the Reserve Bank of India. He was a professor at Center for Development Studies and has also taught at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and he was also the chief economist of the Asian Development Bank in India. Welcome to this conversation, Sudipto. I wanted to talk to you about this recent controversy about demonetization and its fallout. Now, can we say that this policy of the government to demonetize high-value 500 and 1,000 rupee notes has actually managed to curb black money?
I think the demonetization move by itself is not something which says curb black money, but it is part of a larger set of actions which have been taken, the passage of the Benami Transactions Act, the Bankruptcy Code, and hopefully the GST, the remaining legislation, though that is now disrupted probably in this session. All this together can substantially change the environment for those who engage in tax evaded income. Black money is evading tax, basically.
Now, tell me something. When this policy began, the government was saying it will curb black money, it will curb terrorism because terror finance would be hate, that it would end corruption. But suddenly you find the emphasis of the government has shifted now to digitization and cashless economy. Now, has this become a necessity for the government to talk about cashless economy, that they play up a corollary benefit, a consequence of demonetization as a major aim?
Yeah, I think what has happened is, you make a distinction between the policy and the way it was being implemented. I mean, clearly it was being implemented without proper preparation. It has created all this chaos, which you can see, these queues in banks, people can't get money, etc., etc. So the emphasis being given to cashless transactions and so on, to give a push in that, this is a way out of, if you can't have money, can't transact in money, what do you do? And people like you and me in cities, we do have an option of, debit cards, credit cards, what have you. It's much more difficult in rural areas. So I think that's the reason to encourage people to do this. And as people like Nandan have said, Nandan Nilekani, that it will give a push to that because it's much easier now. And certainly it is true that when you do transactions which are cashless, they are much more transparent. There's an electronic trail or a paper trail, and therefore it is much more easy to track compared to cash transactions. That we all know.
But as an economist, would you say that a better option would have been to change the tax regime so that more people become tax compliant rather than people not paying tax?
Oh, there's no question about it, that you should attack, if you want to attack black money, attack the sources of black. Why is it getting generated? So you work on the tax system so that people don't want to do Benami, transactions, tax evaded transactions in the first place. Of course, in every economy, including United States, there are people who will do these transactions. You tighten on those transactions.
Why has another amnesty scheme been brought in where you pay 50% punitive tax to Government of India and 50% of the undeclared amount is sequestered in banks?
The ingenuity of the Indian people is amazing. Just like they found various ways of getting around, this demonetization. I think the Chartered Accountants Association and others have also said that somebody can just go and deposit the money, saying this is my income, 500, old 500, 1,000 rupee notes, and pay a normal 30% of whatever is the chap's taxable rate. He doesn't have to pay any penalty or any of that. By doing this scheme, of course, the government would have a larger take, plus for 4 years, half of that money is supposed to be sequestered, etc., etc. So I think that has been the purpose.
Through the new amnesty scheme, hasn't the government ensured that the money which was not being deposited in the banks or was not being exchanged, which had virtually become waste paper, suddenly acquires a value 50% of its original value? Because this was not going into the banking system in any case. This was money people didn't want to declare. So now you're saying we won't ask you for your sources of income, but don't throw that money away. Give us 50% and you keep the other 50 and withdraw it over a long period of time.
You see, from what we know, already about 60% of about 15 lakh crore that was in circulation have come in. For the remaining month, so the large bulk of it would actually have been surrendered either officially through their people's own bank accounts or through other Benami routes or whatever. The relatively small amount that would be left, that would of course become waste paper. So very few people will do that. To that extent, of course, a person can now go and deposit that money and at least have 50% of its value instead of losing all of it.
Now, assume I am that person. I have this money which I cannot deposit in a bank, which is
Nor do you have
unaccountable.
other routes to which
I have no other routes. But I have either the route of paying 50% punitive tax, or I go to a middleman who takes 30% commission, which is the going market rate at present, and he converts my black money in old denomination notes into new denomination notes. I lose only 30%. If I use the amnesty scheme, I lose 50% of it and access to the rest 50% for next 4 or 5 years. So why would I go for amnesty?
Yeah, it's quite interesting that that margin that has suddenly emerged in what is really now the black market of around 30% is the same as the maximum legal tax rate. So, but yes, you're right that if I have an option or you have an option of rerouting through these other means and taking effective 30% tax cut on that, you choose that rather than pay. But this is a legal route. Now your whole thing gets legalized.
Okay, now tell me what will be the
Because
impact?
the other way, that money that you get back with that 31 cut, it still remains black money.
Absolutely. Tell me what will be the impact on the GDP
Yeah.
and economic growth of this demonetization mess?
Well, it's anybody's guess. I've seen low estimates of 0.5% to high estimates of 3%. My own guess is that it would be 1% plus, but it's a guess. I have no. The short-term effect certainly is very high this year, but we are already half the year was already over by the time this came. So on the remaining half of the year, activity is severely affected. So that's why I'm saying that half that growth rate, let's say, so a little over 1-2%. I think this year.
And next year?
Next year it depends. How quickly I think they'll take them 5-6 months to replace the demonetized currency. And it will then take some more time before things get back into normal. So my hope, and it's optimistic hope, is that this will more or less get covered within this financial year and not spill over too much into next financial year. But who knows? I mean, this has never happened anywhere in the world, so we have no precedent to judge.
But Sudipto, when we talk of GDP and economic growth, we don't talk of individuals and how they are affected. So which are those sectors which have become so vulnerable that a lot of people will not survive in those sectors if this thing continues for 6 months?
Sectors, but people, daily wage workers. You can't get paid. If you get paid in old currency, then you lose a day's wage just to go and queue up. End of the day, the bank says you don't have money, you lose another day's wage. So they are getting hit very badly, that's for sure. The next big group that are affected are the informal sector, a large part of it are traders. And that affects everything from steel and automobiles and so on to the daily vegetables that you and I buy. So that is why the adverse effect of this is very widespread across the economy. There's no question about it.
And how has the banking sector been affected? Will the non-performing assets of banks go up? Because 6 months this year and maybe a quarter of the next financial year, people would not have been able to make the optimum use of their loans. It would not have contributed to growth and therefore would not have contributed to profit, and they would not have been able to pay back their loans.
Yeah, I think the working capital would be affected but people will not even take loans now. The working capital is very short term, so the lending will also be less, the demand for credit, because activity has gone down. But yes, to the extent those have already taken loan and the activities have fallen, there will be some decrease. But the main part of NPLs, as far as I know, is to do with loans of a different kind. People have taken longer term loans and so on. Those are there in any case. I mean, this will not affect that one way or the other. So that's a negative for the banking sector. The positive is the huge increase in deposits. I don't know why they did this CRR thing of 100%. Because I think if the economy is taking a negative hit, partly because of this, some stimulative effect of the rise in deposits would have been helpful. But anyway.
But haven't banking functions themselves been affected? Because banks are doing nothing except counting money, distributing money, collecting people's ID cards and verifying them. there's a whole host of other banking transactions which are either getting delayed or not taking place.
There's no question about it that the banking sector is the vertical which is in crisis mode today. Because they're totally unprepared for this. Suddenly they're hit by this big shock. They're doing their best. Actually, my hats off to the workers in our banks, both public and private sector. They're really working very hard to minimize the suffering of their clients. But they're in great difficulty. I mean, you can do other transactions, but they tell you, they say come early or come after these other types of things are over. So they're doing their best, but yes, people are affected. I mean, clients are affected.
Thank you for talking to us, Professor Mundle. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again with another interesting personality next week. Until then, goodbye, and thanks for watching Catch News.